So we had a whole bunch of questions on there that identified those companies that had already adopted B2B commerce, portals, AI, etc. as a capability, and we grouped them in the top third. Who's adopted the B2B commerce? Who's adopted AI? And in that top grouping, we found that they had the incremental growth, 110% bigger growth than the laggards.
Every few years, research drops that tells B2B leaders exactly where they stand. And Deloitte just published their second B2B e-commerce study. This surveyed 500 buyers, 500 suppliers, and the numbers are really hard to argue with. Budget is now the number one barrier. The digital maturity gap is real, and agentic AI is already shaping how buying works. My good friend Paul Do Forno leads B2B e-commerce strategy at Deloitte Digital. They are the world's largest e-commerce agency, and he's here to share the results. I hope you enjoy it. So this is the episode, Paul, where I do not know how, any way, shape, or form, that we have not had you on the podcast yet. How is that even possible?
I know. How is that possible?
I don't know.
But I did do the keynote at B2B Commerce World.
You did.
And got a lot of good feedback, and we had some of the early results from this, and now we finally got the full results. And so, shout out to the conference in Arizona in November. It was awesome. And I know you're planning for Indianapolis this year, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're in full swing. We're trying to triple the amount of people there at least, which will be incredible. So we're in full swing for that. We've known each other for a long time, and I have a ton of respect for what you do at Deloitte specifically. And I've mostly worked with mid-market companies, and I've always worked with kind of large global companies. And I've always leaned on you for that perspective. And so I've just always enjoyed our conversation. We do have regular conversations, and I just always enjoy them. And I always get a lot of value for it. So I appreciate you coming on and discussing this. But you guys have a new report that already released, about to release. Where's that at?
It just released last week.
Okay.
And so we'll share the link at the end for this report. Yeah, officially got all produced, etc., all the details. So yeah, excited to share, the data and kind of some of the insights.
Walk me through why you guys create this report. Is this a report you guys create on a regular basis?
Yeah, this was the second one. We did one 2 years before around targeting B2B commerce. And so, kind of stepping back, like if we look at the market, B2B commerce is like one of the fastest growing that we've seen in our Deloitte Digital. So, Deloitte Digital, largest commerce agency in the world, and B2B commerce is our fastest growing. And so we did this research starting back now, going back 2.5, 3 years when we did the first research, and then we wanted to update it to see what the latest was, and lots of great insights, and actually things didn't necessarily align to what the first one is. So some good, this is different than before.
Let's start there. I'd love to kind of hear, like, what are some of your favorite insights, or maybe surprise insights that you got this year that may be different from a couple of years ago, or maybe the growth between the two?
Yeah, one of the things that I saw, and again, being in the industry, and that it wasn't that necessarily of a surprise per se, but that the number one challenge that people had was around getting budget for projects. Look back just a couple years ago, that wasn't even the top 5 list when people listed that, right, as issues. And so one of the challenges you have is you have like this big push for change, but because of macroeconomic issues and many other things, tariffs, etc., some of the companies are getting affected by other things. And so that was the number one challenge that people had, was around, getting the budgets and pushing the new technology through.
I think that aligns pretty well with what we're hearing too about kind of alignment between digital teams, executive teams, trying to get budget, trying to get resources. I think one of the other things I saw in the report though too was, while it's harder to get budget, it's also becoming like the most important channel or the most profitable channel as well. So it feels like there's two sides of that coin there that need to be addressed. How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, if we kind of like rise above kind of a couple of the observations and conclusions you have, like, the number two challenge was, so you had like getting the budget to do the projects. Number two challenge was customers are demanding to be more digital.
Yeah, right.
So that was one and two. So they're kind of like between the rock and a hard place. And I think it's also not surprising too, when you step back and look at, one of the other areas that we looked at 87% of the companies are either in the midst of upgrading to an ERP or about to. And so you can imagine, it's easy to say, well, you can't do everything, because so many of these B2B companies, their digital teams are smaller. They don't have, and many of the times they're doing one of these digital transformations every 10, 15 years. Like if you think of the classic manufacturer running SAP, predominantly a back office, trying to, maintain that, they do a big upgrade. They're going to S4. Well, all of a sudden there's all these digital needs and everything else, and work in AI, it just pulls people a lot of different ways. So it's no surprise that you have all these tensions going back and forth.
I was in a distributor, I think it was 2 weeks ago. As I was walking around, I mean, the ERP was green screen. It was a green. It wasn't like Windows 95. It was green screen ERP. And they were saying the same thing. They're like, our next big project is not e-commerce. We gotta upgrade this ERP. We know, and it makes sense to me in a lot of ways, because it's like, to create the foundation for the future in things like AI, in things like commerce, you have to have a better stack kind of behind the scenes running this too, right? You're kind of hamstrung until you do that. So it makes sense to me, but also like having teaching your people how to use a green screen application in 2026 is also insane. It feels crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I remember coming out of college and, still the mainframe guys, and, you're getting onto the internet and just getting web pages out there, and people are like, oh my God, the change. And in some ways we're going through that kind of change with AI. But, to your question around the whole ERP, it's a big deal, right? Like it's like you have to do those upgrades. You have to keep Office up, and you can't ignore it. But one of the things that we've found both in here and both from an experience perspective is companies that look at money, many times when they do these ERP upgrades, there's not a lot of business case. Like they have to do it, right? It's not like, hey, there's lots of incremental growth. So we've had a couple examples of, actually, if you also include, and I'll say commerce and the adjacent front office, other capabilities, and do it at the same time, we've actually shown that it can help create the business case. And we have an example of a couple clients where when they were struggling to figure out a business case for the back office, when they added to do front office work, including commerce, even though it was, and here's an example, even though it was only 24% of the investment, it produced 57% of the value.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And said another way, the front office and commerce helped to pay for the back office.
For the back office. Yeah.
And so that's a lot of our conversation of like, because so many times, as you can imagine, and you've been around the block a few times, is like, hey, we're doing a back ERP upgrade. Come back later,
Right.
right?
Two
Like,
years. Talk to us in 2 years.
and we've actually shown how you can do this in parallel, and in fact, do it in a way such that you can get an early win, like reduce the friction up front with that experience. And some of that experience is not just about the buy. And this is also like the thing that I like to reiterate over and over and over when we're talking about B2B commerce. It's all omni-channel, and it's not just about the buying. It's, a lot of our voice of the customer research says, hey, I just want to be able to see the status of my order, or print an invoice, or get access to product information. Like, those are things that it's all about the ease of doing business. And so that when we get down to it, it's about the ease of doing business.
One thing you taught me, I remember a couple of years ago, we were talking and I learned this from you, is that often if you're going to the board with a big ask like a ERP upgrade, you're already going for a lot of money and a lot of resources. And I remember you kind of coaching, include the front office things in there, like make it a true digital transformation project. How do you help companies differentiate between technology upgrades and implementations versus transformation and actually affecting the DNA of the company with a new kind of strategic mindset around digital and technology?
This is something that we uniquely do, and we're lucky at being at Deloitte. Like, I'm primarily a tech guy in the commerce area and doing this front end stack. But then I have industry experts. So I can go grab a guy who's been doing chemicals for 20 years or manufacturing for 20 and knows the ins and outs. And what we try to do is bring that together. And I think the key to start with, because to help this conversation, is really targeting the commercialization strategy, right? If you find the person in those companies who is the leader, who's around driving the commercialization strategy and getting into, okay, let's talk about your different segmentation strategy. What are the different channels for each of those segments that make sense from commerce that you reduce? So starting from that perspective, as opposed to just saying, pick your technology name. Hey, I'm going to go build something for it. It's more of, what's your priority segment from your business? What insights that we can pull from industry and help them find the value, then get into the technology.
I love that. Well, one of your headlines, I think it was on page 2 of the report. One of the headlines was high maturity companies beat annual sales goals by 110% margin versus lower maturity. So if I'm understanding that right, high maturity is not just about digital sales growth; it's about overall sales growth and margin, which is incredible. How do you guys, or how would you start to think through even what maturity means in kind of plain English, as you kind of describe that percentage?
So what we did is we looked at, so we had a whole bunch of questions on there that identified those companies that had already adopted B2B commerce, portals, AI, etc., as a capability, and we grouped them in the top third. So based on that grouping, we said, because we want to understand, like, the proof's in the pudding, right? Who's adopted the B2B commerce? Who's adopted AI? And in that top grouping, we found that they had the incremental growth, 110% bigger growth than the laggards. So that's really, if you get to the bottom line, if you remember anything from this, podcast and the research here, is that companies that have taken the jump and are using it, they're growing incrementally 110% faster than the laggards.
What are some of the top behaviors that you see in high maturity orgs that low maturity orgs just don't do very consistently?
So I think I talked a little bit about this before, but I think starting with a good understanding of your segments, okay, and starting from the overall commercialization strategy of the company. And because so much time, sometimes when you have these conversations on new tech, you just blindly throw some of these ideas out and it doesn't make sense. Well, different companies, if they're dealing with different channels. So, for example, your largest client, some largest clients, you're going to be using EDI to sell, right? Then you might not have another segment of clients that they're using a lot of Coupa, Ariba, and you need to connect into them. And hey, you can use commerce to do punch out so that you have a unique value add on there. And then some might have a long tail set of clients that just have a straight B2B commerce. And then when you get into different parts of the world, you might have to be in specialized marketplaces everywhere. So really helping them to know that it's almost like, I almost want to like invent a new term. It's like the B2B commerce sales mix to help. You know what I mean? Like depending on your segments and where you're trying to go, you can connect the dots on there. And really, it's not all for one. Because sometimes when you talk, especially when you're pitching to clients and understanding, like, if you say B2B commerce, a lot of them just like glaze over, oh, B2C, yeah, we don't do that. Or they don't fully understand until you start to say, when I understand this segment, this is how I'm going to reach them in this way for these products to drive what your bottom line is. And that's really what's helpful that I've seen to help, businesses really connect with understanding where to use the levers for B2B commerce.
On the sales side, as you talked about, there was some information or statistics around the discrepancy between what companies stated their sales process, like how much of it was automated versus what the buyer's perception of what was automated and good. Can you talk about that gap and maybe some of the numbers that exist behind there and why that exists?
Sure. Yeah. What that is about, we looked at, and this is why part of like our design of our research, we even extended it this time from the last time. So not only did we target 500 suppliers and sellers, we also got the feedback of 500 buyers with their buyer on, and so that you could kind of test questions. So we asked the sellers, how do you view your own automation? How automated do you feel? And those that felt highly automated said, on the sales side, they said 72% thought they were. Okay. And so they said, okay, great. Let's test that versus what the buyers think. And the buyers came back and it was only 47%. So the lesson learned there, to distributors, manufacturers out there is that you may think you're automated, but your customer is not as aligned. And so it's important that you're talking to them, listening to them, and then going back to that whole segment. Maybe you've only focused on a couple key segments, but there may be other segments that might not be as connected.
I think on the flip side of that, if I remember correctly, you have what they perceive as mostly manual, right? So instead of talking about what's automated, looking at what's mostly manual. And I'm interested in some of those numbers too about, how suppliers versus buyers view the transactions of actually the kind of hard kind of workflow steps that they have to kind of walk through the process. I mean, and that's a lot of that's what that means, right? Is someone has to do work and more work than they want to do. I mean, more work than they want to do in a transaction or research or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I mean, if you look the background of all of that, it's really thinking about all the different steps. So like, yeah, I might have to submit a PO, but then it has to get reviewed. Then you might have to get called, and then is your financial terms. And so thinking about all those manual steps, and to the extent that those are automated all along the sales process, And we were specifically targeting the conversations there, or again, targeting about the sales process. Because one of the ways that we define B2B commerce is all things digitally selling between two companies. So from business to business.
There's a chart in there about how I think it was 13% of bids are lost due to negative buyer experience. It feels like there's a lot of these kind of other death by a thousand cuts moments in the B2B buying experience. Did you guys find any other interesting, like, because 13% is not a lot, but it's also, it's also not 2%, right? What that were there other kind of parts of the buying experience that were just kind of mismatched for what the journey should look like?
Yeah, I mean, this gets into the bifurcation of the good versus the bad, right? So, 13% overall, in some ways you could say not bad, but then if you look at the other end, 36% that had a positive experience had a boost in revenue. So if you look at the net total, you're looking at a swing of, almost 50%, right? So it's a pretty big, again, the the companies that have embraced the technology and the tools are way ahead than the companies that are behind. And so that it's not just, even if you say, hey, why well, didn't lose that much? Well, you're losing it to somebody else bigger, and potentially they could be winning over the long term and taking your market share. And I think the biggest thing from what we've seen and also from experience is it's about all the friction points in the buying process. It's not only about hitting the buy button. It's the follow-ups, it's the details, it's the documents, it's the printing of the invoice, all of these things. How do you make it easier just to do business with? And so when you think about, that's why we honed in on the customer experience, because there's a lot of different things that potentially could impact how you interact with companies you're buying from.
What of those things, like what are distributors, manufacturers over investing in right now because it feels modern, in quotes, feels modern, but have them mismatched to things that buyers just don't care that much about? Or you can flip that and say, here are the top things that should be invested in that buyers do care, but sometimes get, they don't get as much emphasis or priority as people might think or want.
Yeah, I think some of this, and I might be repeating this a bit, but I can't overstress, like, especially for having simple portals out that self to enable, like the basic. Because I think sometimes either people think they need it all, like that, hey, we can't put something up if we don't have full functionality. But like, if you bring them along the journey, if they just have like quick access of order status, product information, being able to search the product detail, like all of that stuff, like that enables them to really get over a lot of their hurdles. That whatever payment way they have later, they'll figure that out. But like at the time, they need to, oh crap, I need to plan when my product's going to come, so I have other production, blah blah blah. Like it's okay to start small. And so many times people don't want to just start small unless they have a plan for everything.
You had in the research, there was some information about why buyers select purchase channels, like what the things are that matter to them. Can you talk? I think it was on page 5. Can you talk about some of those reasons and what they value over? I think there's just often things that but sometimes it's agencies that do it, sometimes it's the companies that do it, that emphasize certain things, and it's like the buyers just want things that are very different if we just had those conversations with them.
Yeah, and I think it starts with each, depending on what segment you're trying to reach, they might have different kind of requirements or what they're used to. So I'll use the example of, and I call them kind of high mid, companies that are already using a Coupa procurement system or a Ariba procurement system. If you go and use them, for the most part, they're pretty straightforward usage of content, and all these different products get sucked in, but you just get kind of the basic listings. What we've seen our clients say is like, hey, a lot of our buyers are using these tools and they want us to click in, but we don't get as much of a good experience if we just dump our basic listing into there. And so this is where kind of B2B commerce can kind of give you the best of both worlds, where through punch out you get this great experience, but then their customers still go through when they go to check out, it goes to Ariba or Coupa, and they're still happy because they get to use the same buying rules, etc., and it goes through their whole system. So that's targeting one segment. And then, as you think globally, like people want, if I'm in South America and I'm already doing a lot of my buys all the way through, Mercado Libre, well, hey, guess what? Like, it's much easier. I already have stuff set up that I'm going to buy stuff via that way, right? Like, or, if you go to China, right, it's a whole other marketplace, like looking at their marketplaces, like something that's appropriate for that segment, that makes sense, that makes it easy for them to buy.
You, in the middle there, you kind of referenced punch out, and I know yep. you had some things to say about how customers were viewing and using EDI. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is something that, EDI was one of the first electronic ways of buying, and it's been around, 40 plus years. But we're seeing our stats saying, like, out of the people that are using EDI, 97% of them said they're going to be shifting parts of it away. Now, it's not going away. It'll take some, or, it evolves and extends, but you're going to see pieces of that going to, I say big chunks of it. And one of the fastest growing is this procurement channel. But then others are going to the straight commerce and marketplace channels. So you're starting to see that the percentage of transactions going away just from EDI into other channels.
I know you've done a lot of work around agentic and thinking about agentic, and EDI feels like one of those agentic things to take over, like it feels like, I mean, obviously it's a technology, what we built in the 1970s that really hasn't changed a whole lot in the last 50 years. What do you think the direction of agentic AI is going, not in 3 years, but in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, this is something that I've already had a lot of conversations on. And of course, it's on everybody's top of their head. And one broad thing that I saw, and again from our stats, and I'm sure if we did the study now, we did it in the fall, this past fall. Of the respondents, only 24% had engaged in using agentic in the sales process, which, again, in some ways, we've been in B2B commerce a long time. B2B is always laggards per se, right? So I would expect that the numbers would come back higher. But the thing, again, B2B is going to continue to be behind, maybe on the B2C side, which is just every week there's something new. And so we see that, and it's not necessarily going to magically change everything. It's going to become, we're starting to treat it as another channel. It's another channel that will help support kind of this whole mix of options. And it's also a tool at different parts to provide service and different ways to reduce friction all along the sales process. So it gets a little like, it's going to move really fast, but B2B will be slower than other areas in the sales process.
Paul, so we're talking about agentic. You guys have some decent examples in the report, of what this looks like. But where should even people start thinking about using agentic in the experiences that they're creating? Like, what are the first couple that make sense that people are actually doing?
So some of the interesting thing that we saw in the research, and I'll share that, and I'll add some color in there. Number one thing that people have started with is chatbots. No surprise there. And a lot of that chatbots is around service. Again, that's kind of an extension of a lot of the AI applied, etc. One of the first easy starting points. Well, the next category and the next groupings of things that we've seen has been in the sales process would be around lead prioritization, lead and account research, automating proposals, like all the things that traditionally might have taken a whole team to kind of pull together. That some of that stuff is getting automated and research and blending that all in. And then other things such as, view and order status, following up on ordering this, when orders will ship, and all of these things that are self-service capabilities that normally you would have done just from a digital and looking at a page. They're finding agents to start to run those pieces. And so what we're seeing, even if you have those agents, like an agent and a interface, and so kind of like we're having this interactive kind of, instead of, and I think that's what the future of these interfaces are going to be. It's not going to be just like, it's not all going to be chat. Like that's kind of the first thing. And as it's evolve, imagine you have what normally would be your interactive ordering screen and status, and you can ask questions and tweak it, and it's uniquely updating in real time. I think that mix between AI and that digital experience is going to be the way that this is going to continue to evolve.
This agentic conversation for me goes back to the beginning, Paul, of our conversation where we talked about the ERP. I mean, a lot of the things you mentioned, you talked about order status and even answering questions about products, or even chat, looking back into order history or service requests. I mean, that still requires a very tight coupling with the back end systems. And we know that from your research, 87% of people are looking to modernize that, upgrade their ERP system, do a new ERP perhaps to modernize that stack. How do you think about back office and front office separate, together, lines blurring between the two? Like, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question to understand. And in different platforms in that, you might have slightly different conversations, but let's just say, like, to keep it kind of in the core and thinking about the enterprise. How you enable that self-service in that front office, and it might even be the same technology stack, just different components, right? That still has to be thought about, right? And so too much in this is focused on the tech, like what tech is here and what tech's in front, what tech's behind, as opposed to, and this is where we start back with, what is the business process? What is the business value? How do we change how we can do things, right? And start from there. So, if I'm trying to do a sale, or I'm trying to follow up on when my parts are going to come, and I need to make sure that I'm ready for, a manufacturing deadline. Well, I need those questions answered quickly. Well, that might need quote unquote front office capabilities. And what we have from a Deloitte perspective, we have business processes on the front, what we call the front office, and business processes on the back office. And so each of those processes, like understanding how you optimize those for your business, then mapping that onto the technology. So start with the business process, then start to think, okay, well, how can I agentic help that? How can it help reduce that piece? And but the key thing, and you alluded to it there, was that you need the basic. You can't automate if you don't have the underlying capability.
That's right.
So like, and you could, but you'd have to rebuild everything. And I know there's a lot of discussion about I can vibe code a SaaS all the SaaS
Right.
plat, right? Yeah, that's fine to like get something out for and show some cute examples, but like the amount of logic and connected on these large platforms run massive enterprises, and the massive enterprise, they're not going to magically do that. So what you have is there's a lot of alignment in fact, just today I saw one of the big alliance vendors that we have outlining the stack of presentation layer, data layers, data components, automation layers, AI layers, like how this is all going to come together. And so part of this is given, and this is how we view it, is be rooted in the business process that will be transformative. And then looking at how AI can enable the front end technology. And of course, it has to integrate into the back office and make it as easy as possible. So I know that's a little bit of like all of the, like, kind of blending all of the stuff, but there's no, I think people want to, and you've been around long enough too, like back in the .com days, I went through this. Like I was one of the first early building of websites in commerce. And I remember in the heyday of 99 and 2000, people were saying, oh, the internet's going to kill all the stores out there, or like kill these businesses. And no, they're going to morph and adopt. Like it's not black or white. And I think that's a similar with AI, especially for B2B. Like AI in B2C is accelerating at an unbelievable pace, faster. But on the B2B, because of the complexity of bigger number transactions, potentially legal implications, and all of those, they're not going to be able to, accelerate like that. Where, the fact that there's platforms that have connected to these LLM models to allow for a purchase of a $20 product, that's much easier to deal with than, $1 million contracts that have, could potentially, if you don't send the right product, hurt somebody. Right. So
right.
Just that reality check, stepping back, you can understand why B2B will be a little slower.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need more hardened solutions, right? We just can't jump on a trend and go with it. I think, but I think at the end of the day too, Paul, it's about the foundations that we've been preaching, you and I have been preaching for the last 10 years about what creates a great commerce experience are the same foundations that's going to enable a great AI experience, right? And
100%.
yeah, we'll be able to do stuff easier and better and faster and more efficient with less resources, maybe with less cost, but it's still the same. It's still the same foundation that probably is even more important for tomorrow than it was for today. And so I think we're both on the same page that, go back to those basics. For everybody listening, we're going to have the report. It's a great report. I really encourage you to read it. We'll link to the report in this description. We'll have it on our website as well. We'll have a blog about this post that we'll post, and we'll make sure the link is readily available for everyone there. We'll include information about how to get involved with Paul and talk to Paul, his LinkedIn, all that information. And Paul, just really appreciate your time and having you. I don't know why it took this long, but we'll do it again shortly.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thanks, Paul.
Manufacturers, distributors, leaders in the zone. If you're building B2B, this the podcast throne. The industry's heartbeat, we're setting the tone. Turn insights to actions, it's how empires are grown. We're talking change management, breaking resistance. Strategies so sharp, they redefine persistence. Customer adoption, it's more than retention. It's building a movement, commanding attention. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow.
We bring news, big topics, insights to spark. From the boardroom's glow to the warehouse dark. Digital transformations, the path we're paving. Helping you lead through the change you're facing. This is more than a podcast, it's the industry's voice. Giving you the tools to make the right choice. No fluff, just facts, no hype, just action. The show where solutions are more than a fraction.
It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow.
This is your guide to the digital race. Practical advice, no time to waste. So tune in, gear up, and let's own the space. It's the B2B e-commerce show, the industry's base.